to Unapologetically You with myself, Tulsi. Unfortunately, Kelly is unable to join us for this special podcast today, but today I will be talking to Simon Brundish, and he is the founder and owner of Strength Lab, which provides elite sports science and strength and conditioning services to professional and amateur sports, whilst giving access to the same high quality services to the general public as they are given access to professional sports science, strength and conditioning, which usually is a privilege only reserved for elite athletes and sports people. Yet Simon has incorporated this within his strength lab. And I love that they aim to make the level of training available to everyone. So they revolutionize the way that most people access health and fitness training. Simon and his team offer high quality premium services that allows coaches to be responsive to individual needs and encourages everyone to work at their own level, striving towards their own personal objectives. What I admire most about Simon is his role creating the Superheroes Project, which provides communities across the UK after school classes for local children in fundamental movement patterns, as well as enhancing their skills in speed, agility, and changes of direction. So I hope you enjoy this series of podcasts with Simon. And remember to check us out on social media if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any new podcasts. So here is Simon and I talking about his career, his upbringing, and his involvement in Strength Lab and Superheroes. Start with some of the questions that I had in mind. And a lot was about Strength Lab and obviously your idea of how you've brought it about in physical education, but also where we are with COVID. So those are the lines that I was going to kind of go along. So I'm going to ask you the first question, which was, what inspired you to create a gym and start this unique and successful project called Strength Lab? What was the inspiration that struck you? Because it's such a phenomenal project.
I'm guessing you're looking at specifically at superheroes, the kids element of this, because Strength Lab's 24 years old as a company, which started 23rd of July 1996.
That's what I meant. Is in the Strength Lab in itself, but also it merged into superheroes, didn't it? It's so like you've got your own.
Yeah. Okay.
So tell us more about Strength Lab and how that had started.
So this is straight from uni. This is like in 1996, there was no such thing as a strength coach, no such thing as a sports scientist. I was second year of people that had done sports science degree in England. And then what was there to do? Like there was no pathway that we have now. There was no professional accreditation, or there were no jobs in the industry. There was no industry. And I had these ideas that I wanted to do sports science and then create a network of coaching that connected the gifted and talented sports kids basically with top quality coaches, which probably 10 years after leaving uni became EIS, I would suggest, or derivatives of the Institute of Sport. And then NGB started to latch onto that and create athletic development pathways for those kids and stuff. It's still not ideal now. There's still a whole bunch of kids that get missed, for sure. But that was the idea. And my idea was I need to create some kind of credibility and money to be able to do this. So to go and work part-time as a volunteer at the local athletics club, and then create some kind of strength training programs around that. We had, I opened up with, at the time, like fitness classes were in village halls. So at one point we had 43 village hall fitness classes a week.
Wow.
And it was good money. And lots of lycra and ladies in lycra doing sweaty step classes and stuff and circuits. And it was awesome. But at the same time, working with different sports teams. From Derby Athletics was Derbyshire Cricket Club, and then Derby Storm basketball, and then it worked into football with Coventry and Leeds, and then it just gradually expanded. So there was always some working at what we call elite level now, but it was just in sports. And then alongside working with Gen Pop, because my underpinning philosophy is that I have, and we have, a skill set that absolutely can get the best.
Oh, we froze up a little bit. So I missed your answer then, basically. So you talked about general populations and strength coaches having the experience behind them.
Well, we have the skills that can, better than anybody else, develop physical capacities within anybody within general population. So we have the skills to develop movement competence, and speed, and cardiovascular efficiency, and increase output, and all of those things that are really, really fundamental to human behavior and to human life. And strength coach or the high performance industry, those skills are absolutely usable in everyday life too. And so we've tried to marry those two things. And then it came about when I had kids, life kind of changed a little bit. I've always I would be playing with the 3-year-olds in the corner on the floor, climbing in out of boxes or whatever, and inventing little games and voices and stuff. And when we had kids, I was the stay-at-home dad for both our kids through until they got to school, because I could always work around. My wife's a teacher, so I could work around her school hours, and business was still fine. But then it gave me playtime for 10 years with my kids, developing skills, which I believe of talking to kids, but then opening the imagination of creating fun games. If I want to develop some kind of movement competence here, or some strength in this, let's go and climb here, let's climb under here. And then that, I think that, alongside my wife being a primary school teacher, kind of triggered something in my brain. She came to me 6 years ago. The government had given £10,000 ring-fenced money to improve physical literacy in primary schools. And she asked me what it meant. I had no idea. So we looked it up. No one else had an idea either. Or probably more pertinently, everybody else had their own idea of what it meant. And depending on your innate skill set or bias. So if you were from a physical background, you thought physical literacy was physical proficiency. And if you were from an educational perspective, it was literacy done with some kind of physical idea or something, I'm not sure. But so the gamut of physical literacy is huge.
Yeah.
And so we developed this physical program, and we started to develop this physical program, and then started to work with kids at her school, which gave me this opportunity to see how, let's say, missing in basic skills that I had seen in my kids, and that I remembered from when I was a kid, that suddenly there weren't in any of these kids. They're in huge gulf of skill set between decent ones that I expected, and everybody else. And so yeah, it triggered something to look at how we could bridge that gap and develop a toolbox of skills for kids.
See, it's funny because I started, my first internship, my first S&C post was working with disabled pediatrics. And when I first was obviously trying to grasp what their backgrounds are, what their associated conditions were, how can I obviously read up on their disabilities, and then try and manage the program. I was also coordinating the program as well. So I was booking people in, promoting, marketing, and then coaching. So trying to do everything at the same time. Most of my friends will know, well, that's just you anyway, you'll take it all on. But it was a bit of a shocker. And then when I went to my second internship, which wasn't paid, that was when I worked with able-bodied children. And I'm just like, your movements are horrendous. Like, and it's not something that I would ever say lightheartedly. They were shocking. And I'm like, and I've worked with disabled populations. And part of me was just like, how have children gotten this bad, you know? And it was a question that I couldn't really answer, because it's almost like, right, the question's there, but what can you do right now to implement that change? And I feel like when I was within that internship, that was definitely going along the performance pathway. It was developing the pathway for children. And I'm such a firm believer, like you, Simon, like the general populations do need this education, because the thing is, if we are then teaching competency to children, they will eventually grow up and have the physical literacy and the passion of sport and exercise and fitness, and they will in turn teach their children. The household will be healthier, the children will be healthier, and it will be a knock-on effect. It's just, it takes time to go through the system. But on the back of that, I just wanted to ask, actually, because you are a stay-at-home dad and you've also been teaching and coaching your kids at home, but what do you envisage that they take with them with their physical education that schools aren't teaching them? So they've obviously got the master trainer right in front of them, giving them like coaching tips. But what do you think that they have that actually, if they didn't have you, they would be lacking? What are schools lacking in terms of, I know that superheroes is within schools, but what are the majority of the kids missing at the moment that schools aren't teaching them?
I think from this twofold question, but first with what schools are missing, I think that a quick analogy would be that schools are teaching French in their kids' first exposure to French would be in learning poetry, French poetry, and they've never heard a French word before. And suddenly they're expected to read and write French poetry. That's the equivalent of PE for them. That they go into school and they get told, here's a ball, go and play football. Go and here we're going to play. It's getting slightly watered down now, so we're having evasion games. But most of these kids can't pick their tummy off the floor in a crawling position, or they can't stand on one leg when pick this ball up. Can you climb over this box? Like that, they are so deficient in most rudimentary skills, movement skills, and where schools don't even know that they're at that the level that they're asking of their kids is so far advanced along this matrix, along this spectrum of progression, because they don't understand the spectrum of progression in the first place. Yeah. So they think they're doing a good job because some of the kids are picking up some French, but that's probably because that their parents are French, or if this analogy works, that they're exposed to these kids are going to external coaching lessons of football or swimming or ballet. So some of those kids can vaguely pick up and resemble some kind of the thing that they're being tasked with at school, but it's got nothing or very little to do with the schooling, the learning that they're acquiring in their PE setting. So the outcome is 4 or 5 of the kids look like they've got this beautiful French poem, but none of the other kids can put 2 French words together.
Yeah.
And so what we've tried to do is try to give them a very simple alphabet first. Here is the alphabet, and then from the alphabet we gradually put 2 letters together to make a sound, and then from these 2 letters that we then create a word, and then from the word we start to create a sentence. And the end of the sentence, from my perspective, would be a bound and a stick. Yeah. From a movement perspective. And then you can start to apply an external stimulus of a ball or or an audible task, or you start to task them with specific targets they're aiming for. But unless they control their body to do this one specific thing,
Yeah.
you're just tasking them with stuff that's too hard for them. And the understanding from the education department of the appropriate times to drop in these little tasks and stimulus is, I don't see it. It's completely inappropriate, and they're tasking way too hard. And there is no outcome in mind by the end of, from a primary perspective.
Yeah.
If they look at all subjects, they go in and here learn. Here's your times tables at maths, and then at the end of year 6, you'll get a grade 6 or grade 5 or grade 4 if you can do these things.
Yes.
They don't have that in PE.
No,
and we've just tried to create a very simple matrix that will enable that.
Yeah, and I was definitely going to jump on that bandwagon that you just said, and you explained it so well in terms of there is no end goal, like there is no structure. There is already a structure, but there's no structure that takes them to the end goal. And within that structure, they're not assessing those movement competencies. And the fact that you were able to break it down in such basic movement patterns, which credibly go to create more complex movement patterns. And I know you can, like, we'll be able to break down movement whenever we see a child moving, right? We're able to look biomechanically because we've been trained and educated in such a way, but teachers aren't going to know that. And also they've got other things to think of, especially in primary school when that isn't their core subject. In high school, obviously you've got specific teachers for subjects, but I feel like if we're eliminating the majority of the time to create that basic movement pattern in primary school, or for Americans, kindergarten, you're missing the whole key area at that point.
Absolutely. Fundamentally, it's really key to the whole situation that the children understand the key positions, and they can see in their peers when somebody's doing an appropriate movement or a less appropriate movement, and they also understand how to get from one to the other, so that they can encourage each other, but they know how it looks and how it feels. 100%. All of those things.
Yeah, exactly. It's rather than us recording them and showing them what they're doing, they're seeing their peers and they're feeling how it is to go wrong, to go right. And those are the two things, right? Even as adults, we should be able to feel what doesn't feel good and also when it does feel good. And sometimes it takes time to adhere to those movement patterns, and children aren't going to know that. And I feel like if we stop letting them ask questions, or we're not answering those questions with credible knowledge, well, they're losing out. They're losing out as a consequence of that. But in your opinion, what are the current trends that you're seeing? And I know we've spoken about this before on the phone, but what are the trends that you're seeing regarding children's activities post-COVID? Like, now that they've been housebound for such a long time, what are the trends that you're seeing right now? Because some of the kids have come back training with you. That's correct, right?
Yeah, sure. So just to provide context, we collate data from our 83,000 kids that are in our program worldwide, and we've seen over the years from them coming in at 5 to leaving at 11, or we have kids that go on to 17, but from a primary age setting, that the kids coming in at 5, they have greater trunk stability and coordination than the kids getting first exposure at 11, and that gap's got narrower. The kids coming in at 5 now are getting, compared to 5 years ago when the program started, are having less trunk stability and less coordination than when they're 5. So everybody across the board is worse than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And last year, I've talked about this with a bunch of primary educators, that last year was the first year that the first year group of children that had iPads available to them their entire lives.
Wow.
So suddenly you've got these kids that have been babysat by iPads from birth, that had never had an opportunity to crawl or climb and didn't need to be taken to the park to go and practice swings or climb because they were already entertained on iPads. So there is a significant change year on year. There has been over the last 5 years from an educational perspective, not in PE, just from an educational perspective, specifically with regards to attention and how you have to engage kids because their attention span is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and how they learn is very, very different than how it was even 5 years ago amongst teachers. But that is definitely correlated with less fit, but less mobile, and less kids with less strength and motor control coming in. And what we've seen from post-COVID, there are lots of data that's knocked around about childhood obesity, and I think it's much greater than the levels that we've seen statistically. And 30% of kids are obese when they leave school. I would go down to the fact, if you ever been to swimming with 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, that there are probably 10% of kids who look like you would expect a 10 or 11-year-old to look in terms of leanness. And even the football playing, rugby playing kids still, it staggers me how much soft tissue they have compared to how much they previously used to have. And across the board, I see this now. There's been quite a significant weight gain during lockdown period, but we're getting in the kids that are traditionally active and have been with us. We're getting back lots of back injuries that I've never seen before.
And just remind our audience, what age range are you seeing this in?
So this is after. So we're talking post-primary now for the kids that we've had, because schools are still closed. So we're looking at 12 to 18-year-olds. In 48 kids, we'd had 16 back injuries.
Wow.
16 back injuries in athletic teenagers. And this was within the first 2 weeks. So we'd done nothing more than, we'd not broken 60% speed. No sprinting, no jumping. This is just basically warm-ups and small, low-level change of direction games and superhero stuff. And we're getting back and ankle injuries, and some in the shoulder too. So really bad structural joint issues at a level we've never seen. And so if my guess would be, if this is seen within the sporting end of the spectrum, what is the rest of the spectrum look like?
Yeah,
so
it's shocking.
I would be very concerned with going back to school.
Yeah.
If you remember at the beginning of lockdown, like the Joe Wicks thing, that people loved or hated him, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is that after the first week of Joe Wicks, kids have stopped doing it. So it was just left with moms and a few kids, but that the big wave of kids doing it with their parents had stopped. So when primaries were open from a key worker perspective, because they weren't allowed to teach, they were basically babysitting in a hall with the key workers' kids. First week they were doing Joe Wicks. By the second week, the kids were already bored and stopped doing it. So they already removed that physical element. So the idea that the government had that kids were at home doing this exercise, it just wasn't true.
No. And it's just like you said earlier, it's that attention span and their focus within something. And if they're not so much entertained, but if they don't see the value of it, or they see value in something else, well, their attention will go just as quickly. And on the back of that, actually, I wanted to ask you, it's not an official question, but I just wanted to ask you, how is that focus and that acknowledgement of the presence of social media changed the way you coach young children now? Has it changed, or has it not?
I think it's influenced it for sure. So how I work with the older kids, so it's like post 12 up to 16, 17, I now use social media deliberately as a way to entice good practice effort. So the kids get rewarded by me posting videos of them on Instagram of them. They love it. It's literally the only reason I use one of the Instagram accounts. It's how they work. It's the thing that younger perspective, maybe not social media, but technology, how it works with their attention, is that I believe a couple of things really. That to motivate a child, they have to feel success.
Yeah.
And then they have to see the opportunity of success. So you have to create an environment where they understand what success looks like, which is, from a superhero's perspective, is they see the pathway and they understand the specific elements, the 5 key points that they get, and then they could get a star for each of them, so they get rewarded with success. Then they can see their plot along a graph, which is very simple, colourful, but easy to identify their pathway, and they can count stars. They're used to this whole star thing, because who doesn't love to get a star sticker, whatever. So they can count them over the course of the year and they get rewarded. But they not only see this progression of success, but they see that they improved objectively at this skill, and which has opened up the door to this next skill, which is just a layer on the previous skill that they had. But 3 weeks ago, they couldn't do any of those skills, and now they can, and they're beginning to open up this level that they can do something they never thought they could possibly do before, that the kid that is good at sports could do in the first week. So suddenly this challenges them they're only really competing with themselves, but once they get going, they can compete with others from a star's perspective if they so choose. But there needs to be this an objective level of success. And the other way to motivate children, I found, is that a level of competition is good, but it can't be an open competition. You can't just have a class race, because there'll be kids that are going to win, and then a whole bunch of kids that don't try because they're never going to win. So what you can do is, we don't like grouping because our society doesn't like grouping. It is what it is. You can make a judgment or not. It doesn't matter. If you can just use that if we allow them to group themselves, you can then race their own group against one another, because then there is an opportunity for success. They might win against these 4 other kids that also aren't very good.
Sure.
Don't compete those against the good kids. Compete the good kids against the good kids, or the ones that are already excelling at sports.
Yeah.
And then you still retain motivation and competition.
It's like you're creating that band, and it's a performance within your circle, that you're not going to compete with the 100 meters who you know are very athletic and can win, or actually you're going to compete with your own physical elements, which there is a chance, there is a 50 to 60% chance, whereas before they might have been a lower chance. It's funny that you say about the progression of the stars, and I really, really like that, because it's funny how in education, and this is not picking on education, it's just using it as an example, that education always has, well, you learn for a season and you learn for a couple of semesters and you have your exam as your end goal. But we don't really have that in the working environment. Work usually in a professional domain is you work towards a project, and then the project is your conclusion. It's not really I need to be tested at this point. But I found that in PE, that doesn't really count. PE is such a unique subject where there aren't any final assessments. Like, you get a sports day, but there isn't any final assessment. But what you're doing is giving the teenagers, giving the youth a chance to see their own progression and development, and actually use that as accountability and acknowledgement that there is no end goal. Like, even though you can't see the end goal, but you can see yourself working as a progression towards it, and that in itself gives them that feedback and that confidence, as in, I'm able to now unlock this next movement pattern, or I'm able to go to the next stage. But I feel like that is what's missing in PE, because there is no unlocking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. There's no progression.
Yeah, 100%.
There has to be an outcome in mind, otherwise you don't get to progress towards it. And so creating that is kind of a key. One of the big learning experiences involved in what I find is just good teaching. If from a school perspective, if the school adopt it, there should be cross-curricular learning going on. So a project of if the topic this term is Africa, and we're going to teach maths in a way that involves these things, and if we're going to write stories in English to go with this, if we can fit PE around this as well, so there is a movement involved in this. So if we're using, from a younger age, if we're using like an African story or a jungle, and then jungle animals that are used from there geographically, we can talk about those things. So they're bringing part of their geography. And if you can cross these things over, that's just key to all learning from a school perspective. And specifically from a PE perspective, if we go this shape, can you, well done, you mastered this shape. Now over the weekend, can you go and find this shape in the sport you watch with your mum or dad? And then they can start to identify that. That's an outcome. So we're not actually talking about that as an outcome, as a thing, but we're just planting a seed that if you learn this side lunge here, this Thor, then look, LeBron James is doing this when he is making a cut to the basket. Those simple things leads to, you don't have to explicitly say that LeBron James practices this thing, but it unlocks that curiosity from a movement
100%.
perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because you're not only just teaching somebody to say, learn this, but you're actually saying, think for yourselves. And that's basically what you're trying to say and do, in terms of people learn in different ways. And there'll be vast amounts of children who prefer a certain learning style. But actually, if we're integrating it into seeking more knowledge, getting more curious, that fire, if we can create that, that's going to take them beyond PE, beyond school, and then hopefully into the young adult age.
It's good learning, but then if we can remove barriers to, I can't be a gymnast, it's unlikely, but I can't do sports. So my goal for all of these kids is that it's a very silly, loose goal, but I want them, when they're 25, to be going out to play netball or hockey or football with their mates on a Friday night before they go get drunk.
Yeah.
I'm aware of how the world works, but that's the choice. I don't want them in an aerobic studio at twice a week trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
I want them to have a good relationship with health, with fitness, with their body, with sport. And so if I can help in any way remove the barrier of, I don't move well enough to play a sport, then it opens up all of these doors to them to find a sport that fits their physical profile, their skill, that's something that they can enjoy with their friends.
Yeah.
And it's something that they will actively, both in the metaphoric, in the actual sense, but also in the metaphorical sense, so they can actively go and participate in by doing, but also something being active. And there are so many, and doing sports, participating, playing in sports, I find as a human covers so many parts of the spectrum of being a human, and is a very, very positive experience of being a human. You don't have to be good at it, you just have to be good enough at it to be able to participate. And I think all PE can remove the barrier of not being able to move well enough to participate.
Exactly. And you're bringing in enjoyment, you're bringing in relationships. Hopefully in that stage, you're bringing in the levels of participation, so you don't need to be an expert to participate in that. When I was working in Mercedes, obviously working in the gym side of things, we were trying to not only increase the footfall that was stepping into the gym, but also for those particular individuals and the group of people who weren't interested in the gym, how can we get them more active? And we're talking about adults here, late 20s up to about 50s. And we would just encourage more activity. So we created networks to go to rugby. People would participate in tennis. People would participate in netball. But we were encouraging that, but by saying, well, how can you be more active by yourself as a person? And that in turn will knock on to your work and personal life. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be signing yourself into the gym. So, and those are the things that you're hearing so many people saying, oh, you love hanging out with my friends, and they will actively go have fun with them, and you're not taking yourself too seriously. And there's a level of competition where you're just like, I want to win, But also, yeah, you then get to go to the bar and then have a drink if you choose, or hang out with these people. And I feel like that social networking, you miss that as you get older, because you don't have the amount of friends that you did in high school. And obviously you choose who you spend time with, but it brings so many advantages that people are forgetting, as well as we forget about confidence in adulthood too. There's a lot of lack of confidence, and playing in sport, even for guys, it's like, oh, I can't believe I can play with the boys now. Like, I'm playing football every week and I love it. And it's like, it doesn't matter about age, it doesn't matter about your level of competency, but you're enjoying it and you're being active and you're taking care of yourself in one way, and gaining all these, the plethora of benefits as a consequence. But on the
Doesn't matter about losing and winning either.
yeah, it's just like, yeah, you're happy for them winning, but you'll get them back next time and you'll look forward to the next game. But actually that brings me into not only women playing sport, but in terms of coaching girls, because there is no gender bias in the program. You're inclusive for everyone. But what lessons have you picked up, or what are the differences that you've noticed between coaching girls or even working with female coaches?
It's really interesting. We talk about the gender straight away. Like, we talk, our population now, our culture is don't group, but then everybody groups everybody all the time, and it can be really reductive because we make huge groups, boys, girls. It's insane, and it's like, it's concrete as well. Once you're this gender, I'm not even talking about it in genderness. I'm not talking about the fluidity of gender. I'm talking about, once you've been grouped as this, it's one thing. Yet, not taking into account, like, this movement of gender as you age, and how dominant at some things they can be as a group, because one gender tend to, if we're if we're being general here, one gender grows quicker than the other. So at various points, one group is probably going to be stronger and bigger than the other, but at one age in their life, the weaker, supposedly smaller group is actually going to be the bigger dominant one. So at 11, girls are way bigger than boys. If you just took the average of a year 6 class, the girls are going to be 5 or 10 kilos bigger than the boys are at that stage. And you have to make an allowance for that. I might have probably played into the fact that boys think they're stronger and boys think they are faster and tougher by having some kind of strength test, or let's see who can do more Ironman, or who can jump further, or let's have a little wrestle and see who's going to win, because that helps to neutralize that whole gender bias thing that we have, that's innate within our cultures or whatever. But girls, from what I found early on, they don't like to stand out. So they like to be the same as the rest in their group. Or the boys instantly want to jump to the front of the queue and be the one that demonstrates, or the one that leads, or the one that's different, the one that's amazing. So you have to kind of control that within the group. That's one of the aspects of being in those two groups. But they oddly, very often, even from a young age, like to compete, boys against girls. They like that challenge. And throughout primary school, physically, there is very, very little difference. You absolutely can. And from a superhero's perspective, the average girl tends to be more competent than the average boy, and the rate of acceleration through the program is a little bit faster. We kind of stream for ballet, football, rugby, swimming, and gymnastics. And just because of I presume, the cultural issues in our society, that girls tend to do more ballet and gymnastics, the girls that do gymnastics are the best at superheroes by miles. And their movement competence is off the charts, and their ability to overcome a challenge or a task is much better. And football is the worst. So you get a bunch of boy footballers who think they're amazing and they're good at one thing and they can't do anything else, and they also can't listen because they're always been the best in their group. So there is all of those social psychological elements with playing with boys and girls, for sure. and with coaching these. As they get a little bit older, it kind of changes as the boys get stronger. And then from what I found in adolescent girls, they have this idea that they either don't want to be strong or they think they're not, and they think it's impossible. So what I found is little bits of strength or little bits of reactivity from jumping and bounding and make them a little bit faster. It just opens up this crescendo of this huge wave of motivation and enthusiasm to succeed. And they actually love the idea. Once they get a little bit stronger, love the idea of it. Well, boys, you can't talk to them at all.
Yeah.
They just think they're really great.
And do you find that girls question more or try to seek more answers in regards to, well, why are we doing this? What is the method of this? Do you find that with girls or not so much?
I think I have this idea that 8-year-old boys and 15-year-old girls are the worst version of each gender. So 8-year-old boys either don't listen or question and don't listen everything you say. Yet 15-year-old girls, they're the same, but more vicious at those things. They question everything you do and largely don't want to follow anything you have to say. So you have to fully justify everything that you asking of them. And then if they can be bothered, they will join in. But 8-year-old boys, they're weirdly, they're in a very similar questioning and level of motivation, but you have to kind of herd them towards the thing you want them to do, like they're wild cats.
I see.
But yeah, so I don't think there's a gender thing. I think there's a specific age within each gender.
That's interesting. That's really good. Things. Yeah, I like that answer. Well done. So any 15-year-old girls listening, just listen. Just take advice. We know what
I appreciate. It's really tricky. You being a lady, girls have so much more stuff to cope with than boys do. Adolescents, particularly, I think there's probably a lot more social psychological pressure on boys than there's ever been in the past. And we talk about it with girls.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it with boys. And I think the girl thing has always been there. Girls are mean to each other and hold each other to a visual standard that. But I remember that as a kid, that was there. Girls always used to do that with each other. Boys didn't. And now, because of social media, they do. And it's a whole different element that I've never seen before.
Yeah, that's a whole different ball game at that point, isn't it? It's like trying to tackle their own insecurities and now how they interpret what a boy or a man should be. What do they look like? Like, girls have had that. Girls have been like, well, what type of woman are you? What type of role model are you? And they look at celebrities. This is just a generalization, basically, but they'll look at role models and celebrities and be like, I want to be like this. But I feel like males are probably getting that more so in the last decade, because of social media.
For sure. And if you look at like famous actors, those people that we've talked about this before, but if you look at those role models, say when I was a kid, it would be, when I was 15, it would be like Michael Hutchins or George Michael, or who else was really famous at the time? At the beginning of Brad Pitt, maybe, but probably not. Probably a little bit before that. But if you look at the comparative versions now, like the most famous men in the world, like then, George Michael was just a handsome man. He was just a handsome man, and like Michael Hutchins, again, charismatic, very handsome man. Neither of them had seen the inside of a gym ever in their lives. And you look at now, in any movie, the handsome man's ugly best friend that is a weakling that works in an office as a secretary and gets picked on. If you take his shirt open, he is ripped. So gone is the days where Dolph Lundgren or Sylvester Stallone are the leading man with their big, very obvious muscles. Now everybody has a six-pack. and everybody has defined delts. And do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so the minimum standard for boys now is a level we've never seen before. And when I was a kid, Kate Moss was still Kate Moss, and Cindy Crawford was. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were still beautiful and ripped.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there's a little bit more training coming into women's ideas now. I see my daughter; we train every day. She wants to be strong, which is
Nice.
awesome. She has a great relationship with food, and she's perfectly aware of that there is a cost to her eating cheesecake, so she'll go and work out, or she will fuel her workout with appropriate food. And you know,
Yeah.
this I think it's a really healthy relationship, which I've never seen before, which I'm very happy about. But you've got all of these women, that even particularly ones in England, that look like Barbies on their face because they've had stuff done to the face, but they're still kind of skinny fat.
Mm.
And I find that's way, we were at two ends of a spectrum. I think it's unhealthy, the women that our girls aspire to be now through Instagram, the ones that have been rewarded with fame because of the way they looked, like, so reality TV people.
Yeah.
Because then none of them are, they're really, I don't know what you think. I don't see a lot of them, but they tend to be like flat-butted, kind of skinny-legged, never lifted weights. And then yet the boys are all absolutely steroided off their heads. And so you've got this spectrum of goals for boys to aim at, which is completely unrealistic, and goals for girls to aim at, which is not unrealistic, but it's just unhealthy.
This
It's a tricky time.
Yeah, it's so complex. I think it's almost like we can do another podcast on female and male issues and their insecurities, because whilst you were talking, for me, it's, girls have gone through their own insecurities, and I feel like until you reach like late 20s, 30s, that you start to become a little bit more confident in your body. But then I know 40-year-olds who are super insecure about, they've had their child and they're like, well, I've got these marks now and my body didn't always used to be like this, or I wish I appreciated my body more when I was in my 20s, because as a teenager, you never do. But I always, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself that we don't really, there isn't so much information out there about, as a real life example, I know a friend or a couple of friends who are super skinny, and they were tall, but they were made fun of because of how they looked in high school. And as they were growing up, they just didn't grow into their body. And now as adults, they know and they're understanding their physique and how they want to be, but they did admittedly say, well, I want to be fitter, or I want to lose this, or, I want to gain more muscle. And I'm hearing this because obviously they're telling me what they want as a program perspective, but also I'm hearing their insecurities of, well, I'm skinny, so I'm not fat, but I want to build muscle, or I want to get fitter, or I want to, be a little bit more, I want to look strong as well in terms of social media. And you forget that in terms of a certain generation where women were told skinny is the way you should be. And luckily social media now has shifted that pattern at the moment, where strong is the new in for women. And all different body types are being present in social media, which is great. But in terms of...
Do you not think, sorry to interrupt here, right? But do you not think that on my Instagram, I don't know why, I don't use it very well, but if I click on the search button or whatever it is that shows you recommended stuff, it's full of, I get full of like basically CrossFit women. I'm largely sure that's probably because of the guys I follow on our Instagram account happen to follow these CrossFit women. But I'm naming no names, Neil Parsley. But it's really important to have like these strong role models. But like you say, there's a spectrum available now. So there are much bigger models, deliberately bigger models.
Yeah.
But they're always there because they're deliberately bigger. So I would compare this to, in the 80s, having a deliberately black kid in a Disney movie, when they were picked because they were the black kid to show the world that there is a black kid. That's all. So we're getting this now. So I'm not sure how important it is to see this. I'm obviously not an oversized woman, but does it actually make it normal? So I see there's a level of tokenism in picking this oversized model, promoting these one or two oversized models. Yeah. And I'm not sure that it's changing culture. It's just All it is whoever is the branding company is saying, look, we believe in oversized models. When they don't, they're just showing this oversized model. And we're having this conversation about don't pick on fat people when it's actually legitimately unhealthy and costing that person and the nation lots and lots of money because they have to pay for the outcome of being fat because there is a consequence. So I don't think it's a choice. Don't pick on me. Don't pick on anybody. But don't. I'm going off a huge tangent here. Don't say negative. Have negative judgments about oversized people. I understand you don't say mean things to them because you shouldn't be mean to anybody. But it's not okay, and you do need to be healthier. It is a consequence of you not being healthy, and there is going to be a cost, and it's going to be financial and medical, and there is a cost to everybody from you being overweight. There just is. We can pretend it's not, and hopefully it doesn't affect your psychology too much, but we need to give you the tools as strength coaches or anybody. We need to give you the tools to be in a better position. And if we have better PE, this won't be the outcome in the first place. So let's fix PE. But the other, going directly to the thing you said, that so we've got those strong women, we've got these oversized women, but then, which is definitely more prevalent, but the most famous women in the world, the women that have the highest Instagram followers, they aren't strong women. The celebrity, those women that are just famous for being celebrities, they aren't hardworking, ripped women that train. They're just skinny that have had stuff done to their faces. And so we've got all of these 15-year-old girls that see these on Love Island or on, I don't know, whatever the other reality TV shows are. And these are millionaires, and they're millionaires only because of the way they look. What message does that send?
See, that's an interesting statement, because the funny thing is going back to seeing an overweight person, a female particularly, even though previously I said there's a diversity of female representation in terms of body images, especially these days where a lot of Instagram followers is a new thing to show reality versus Instagram. And I've seen a lot of comparisons, and it does make women in general feel a lot better to see an unfiltered photo in comparison to the fittest, best positioning photo with the best light. But on the flip side of things, I acknowledge that somebody who is overweight or even an oversized model is a great representation to actually give the diversity of looks and also the diversity of weights to young women. But to acknowledge that actually this isn't healthy. Are you able to move? Are you able to breathe? Are you able to be healthy yourself? And healthy doesn't necessarily mean moving well. It means eating well, thinking well. For me, it's holistic. You know, be a good person, do good for others. It's kind of encompassing. But going back to that point where you said, with different role models, I feel like there are going to be a lot of people who admire, what do they call it? Contouring. Like contouring. I've seen photos and, oh my goodness, I'm just like, if I made more effort, I would look really pretty. Because I could contour this shit up. I mean, but I'm too lazy. Like, I don't
It's not pretty. You just look like the Brats. You ever see it?
Oh my God.
When my daughter was 7, they announced that, I don't know, there was this range of dolls that replaced Barbie and Cindy, and they were called the Brats.
Yeah.
And basically, these are grown-up women now that dress like the Brats.
Yeah. I don't understand it, seriously, because I'm just like, well, men don't have to wear makeup. And I know some do, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, why are you hiding who you truly are? And obviously it may stem from insecurity and what they, doesn't matter what no judgment from me, they do what they need to do. But I feel like it's an algorithm. You're going to see your own bubble, either filtered, either photoshopped, either fitness, either cross trainer, either political. And I feel like every single area you can find female role models. Like if you search hard enough, we are there. Like there are not that many representations that are, high profile. But you can find them. You can find it in your own family. You can find it in social media. And I feel like my algorithms, I'm going to specifically say, well, who's a great, phenomenal political figure, you know, and who's good at books or writing or something like that. And I feel like those are my interests. And I feel like, I think there's so much knowledge. Going back to what we first talked about, there's so much knowledge out there, but you need to refine which knowledge and which social media outlet and avenue that you want to go down. And that includes the people that have similar interests to you, their body figure, their food, their lifestyle, their fitness, and those are the things that I think that people are then submerged into. So if you're going to feel insecure, or if you're going to feel that this interests you, or you could be into sci-fi or something like that, and they're going to be your role models, you know.
I agree. I reckon if we circle back to the beginning, implement appropriate PE where we give appropriate skills, movement skills, and enough to a level that we can start to expand capacities, physical capacities of kids, and remove the barriers of entry into sports, into team sports, I think it fixes so many of these issues.
100%. And the thing is, if you notice that people who are confident in themselves or secure in where they're going, what they're doing, what their purpose is, none of those insecurities or none of those role models come into their sphere, because they're so determined about what they are, who they are, where they're going, who influences those areas. So I 100%, like, we are literally, aren't we trying to create a new breed of people? If we start to tackle their movements, there's a knock-on effect. And as I said earlier, you know, we want these fit individuals, these competent movers, to then have children and, you know, teach their family about food, about
model behavior.
Exactly. And that is what it is. And it will take time, but yeah, I think submerging those two ideas will create the next generation and the next, hopefully, competency in movement and physical literacy as well.
Hopefully, because society as in general is not going to do it, because year on year we're removing the opportunity to, not the opportunity, removing the need to move year on year.
100%. Yeah.
So now we need to take more opportunity of the opportunity to move, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We need to actively decide to do things which require movement, because there is no need to move anymore. We can just get in a car. We can just get on an electric scooter. We can just turn the TV over with the remote, with our voice. We can just get Alexa to shout the kids from upstairs for us. All of those things, that just removes movement from our daily lives. And so we actively have to do things that participate. And if we can do those things together, because humans need human contact and camaraderie and teamwork and communication and emotional feedback from somebody's face without verbalizing. You get to see when somebody likes something you've done. It's that face-to-face contact. If we can still keep those hubs of people together by playing sports, I just think that's the only way humans are going to survive in the current incarnation.
Sports will save the day. Okay. So I'm going to give you, we're going to tie this up.
Save the day.
We are going to, was lucky we're in a good profession, right? We normally end in a quick fire round, but what I'm going to do is segment it into 3 parts. So key knowledge for coaches, a little bit more about you, and then general info. So we can keep it quick fire, and if you want to go off on a tangent, you can. I'm going to leave you with the autonomy to do that. But the first question would be for general coaching. What books would you recommend to key knowledge for coaches?
I wish I'd done some research. I'm terrible with names. That's the thing. So I would recommend, from an S&C perspective, it's really important that you know your how to cross your T's and dot your I's. So I would look at like high performance. I would look at Game Changer from Fergus Connolly for a type of system and how you're creating systems and how you're creating an ecosystem within how you set up coaching, which is wonderful. But then I would be looking at non-coaching books for sure. Just psychological, how to be more comfortable within your own skin kind of stuff. And that the better you know you leads to the better outcome with coaching. That's what I found.
I like it. I like those. And in sticking to the key knowledge for coaches, what conferences do you suggest that coaches should be attending or should attend for their knowledge?
From a youth perspective, Child Champion by It's Not Close. In my experience, it's a phenomenal network to be involved in, but the opportunities to learn and share on that are massive. And you've got like true world leaders that will be happy to share their experience both practically and within presentation, but then give you the opportunity to chat and ask your questions and so you get to interact with on a one-to-one level, seeing how they move, how they speak, how they treat other people, and those are key elements for sure. I would leave it at that for now.
Brilliant. Love those answers. And now we're going to transition into about you. So what motivates you? Because you've gone through the ringer with the gym. Obviously, there's going to be massive changes in terms of the movement of sites. But what motivates you? What is the key that keeps you waking up in the morning and going?
I feel like I am really fortunate that I stumbled upon an industry that I have managed to acquire a set of skills that do things I both see morally are important, but I'm also not bad at. So the things that I get to do every day improve the both physical, mental, emotional well-being of kids up to 80-year-olds, and physically get to change people's lives in a very positive way. Whether it be from early days, I've got a story where on Facebook last week, we don't use Facebook very much, but I got a notification on Facebook last week from one of my earliest clients who came to us 18 stone, and long story, she had rediscovered her first love and wanted to have a baby. She was 43 and 18 stone. She no longer menstruated because she was so overweight. And I'm not a big weight loss guy. It's not my world, but of course we still have these skills. And we got her down to 11 stone. She got pregnant, had a baby. Consequently, I've been doing this a long time. Her baby had a baby last week.
Oh my God, wow.
Which is like, so the real world positive consequences from the skills that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about here's an Olympics or going to a World Cup or ATP tours or any of those things that feed an ego. I'm never quite sure, having been through that spectrum of the elite performance world, how much difference I make at that level. But I know in general population, I can make a huge difference to people's lives. I can keep Parkinson's patients both alive, cognizant, and moving in a way that they didn't before. And give them 5 more years where they can have two-way relationships with their family and still get to do some of the things they love, like gardening, when they couldn't before. I get to give kids the opportunity. The little fat girl who'd never done PE in her life, had letters written to school I had complaints about because she was so sore after doing PE, and she's not allowed to do PE because it's just that her fat mom didn't agree with it. Basically, she didn't want to feel bad about being the fat mom when the daughter was actually fitter than her. And then she gets to be superhero of the year at the end of year 6, having done superheroes for 3 years, and now is in a netball team. Like real world changing events, like being in academies with kids, fixing movement motor coordination problems, and then playing for nationally for their clubs. Like I get to do this, and I get to wear shorts every day, and people pay me, and I can pay my mortgage, and my kids see it, and they have this very positive relationship with exercise and food and sports because they see it.
I love that. That's such a terrific answer. Well done. Well done. I love that one. Okay, so a little bit more about you. Final question. What is your next step?
I have no clue, but that's not from a negative perspective. I just think that, as I said to you, I have a great life. I get to do awesome stuff every day, and each year something new I stumble upon something new that I didn't know existed before.
Yeah.
We've talked about this new product, a new gadget that we've invested in called Pinoe, which is a gas metabolic analyzer, a mobile one. So people can. So traditionally, we would take a VO2 max and a lactate test in a university or a hospital on a treadmill with gas exchange, and then we would plot somebody along exactly the same track on a treadmill and say, this is your lactate threshold, here's your VO2 max, and at this speed you're outputting this much lactate, and so here's the training zones you need to work on. Well, we've got this new system which we're hopefully rolling out in the next couple of weeks, which is going to tide us over until the next proper phase. But it's a resting metabolic analyzer. So you lie down for 10 minutes, stick this gas mask on. It tells you exactly how many calories you've used, so it can project over a day your resting metabolic rate. So we can set people trying to manage their weight actual realistic targets without guessing. We can I can strap this onto you while you're playing tennis, and if you're on a ATP tour, we can set up your training zones around actual output of how much carbon dioxide you're producing and oxygen you're using while you're playing a game of tennis, so that we can set up strategic overloads of training zones. So that might be the next thing that we're looking at. But also expanding superheroes to have an extra strand, and so just trying to broaden the toolbox of kids learning. So with somebody we might know might bring in some kind of combat element, which is awesome to expose kids to.
Brilliant. Well, it all sounds exciting, and I love the strategic element of taking on a little bit more of a scientific approach to what you've got, because the thing is, you don't want to be lugging lots of kit around, or even taking time up in a lab. And if you can find a tool that actually is easily accessible, it's mobile, and then you can gather some of the data in that, fantastic. And it's nice to see the superhero strand expanding too. So final question, this is the final question. We normally ask all of our guests, who would they want to hear from? Who would you recommend that we have as one of our next guests on Unapologetically You? If you can pick anyone, who would it be?
God, this is like, are we talking Obama here, or are we talking specific coaches?
We've actually, so it's normally open to everyone and anyone, right? But we've actually had one of our guests, and it's not aired just yet, but we've had one of our guests talk about Michael Jordan, and I'm like, have you got his number? Because how are we going to get it? So we have challenges. We definitely, Kelly and I definitely have some challenges. She wants to speak to Michelle Obama. I mean, that's one of my heroes. So yeah, okay. But I'm just putting it out there that we've already had Michael Jordan and Michelle Obama being mentioned. So yeah,
that would be kind of amazing. From my part of my work is within women's football. I think it would be fascinating to have on one of the new. If you can't get like Lucy Bronze, it would be somebody with one of the retirees that are working within football right now as the commentators, because all you hear from them is their little they're generally talking still in the same football cliches that the men have traditionally, because I think it's hard for them to break out from that and give their actual perspective, because the culture within they don't want to stand out. Who does? Like, you don't know if it's wrong, if people will accept it or not. And I would love to know more about like either of the two main female characters, because they are characters now. That's where we put our pundits. We create them, create characters for them. So that would be really interesting, like playing for England 100 times and winning and being at World Cups, winning European Championships, that kind of stuff. And I think the journey involved in being an elite level women's footballer would be fascinating.
Awesome. Well, I've already got in mind a successful S&C female coach who works in football. So I'm just we're trying to arrange times with one another because she is super busy, obviously. But yeah, to try and get a female athlete as well, I think that would be interesting. Or maybe we can coordinate it that her coach and the athlete would be on the same podcast. But those are amazing guests that we obviously have to have challenges towards now. So yeah, thank you so much for all of your time and your answers. And it's just been really, really interesting, especially when we had the conversation right at the start. It's actually, I think with you and I, we always end up having these conversations that turn into real thinkers. And it's not often that you have conversations that make you think or change the way you approach your projects. And it's nice to have some meaningful answers to some of the questions as well. So thank you so much.
I think from my perspective, it's great to come on, but from my perspective, our conversations, I don't think you grasp how much you influence my thinking.
Oh, that's a massive compliment. Thank you so much. I hope in a good way, right?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll chat to you soon. And all the information on how to find Simon on his social media and follow Superheroes and Strength Lab as his own business will be in the description below.